I'm the top salesperson who generates millions in profits for the company. The boss left on a business trip for a month, putting his girlfriend in charge of the place. Who would have guessed that her very first decision as the new boss would be to come after me at 10 in the morning? I arrived punctually at the office, saw a coworker looking uneasy, pointing at the boss's office and whispering, "Bianca is here. She wants to see you." Bianca was the boss's new girlfriend. Known for her arrogance and aggressive attitude, she'd insult anyone who rubbed her the wrong way. I never expected she would target me next. I set my coffee aside and opened the door to her office. As soon as I did, a folder came flying straight at my face. "Do you know what time it is?" she barked. "The company policy states that work starts at 8 a.m. Why are you arriving at 10? The edge of the folder gave me a cut that began to bleed on my forehead. I pressed my hand against my head, staring at Bianca as she flaunted her authority from behind the desk. My 10 a.m. arrival was a privilege granted to me for being the top producer. Everyone at the company knew this unspoken rule. Years ago, when the boss's business was on the verge of collapse, they hired me by chance. In my first month, I brought in $5 million in sales, saving the company from bankruptcy. Ever since, the boss viewed me as a key asset, often listening to my suggestions for important decisions. Bianca slammed her fist on the desk, her face contorted with rage. "Look at your entry card. You've been coming in at 10 for an entire month. Do you think you're above the rules? According to company policy, 3 consecutive late arrivals can get you fired. You can leave right now." I looked at Bianca in disbelief. "You're firing me? Did you consult the boss? I generate 80% of this company's earnings, and you have the nerve to fire me?" Bianca gave a cold laugh, glaring at me with contempt. "You're just a salesman, an unremarkable one at that. What's wrong with letting you go? This is my boyfriend's company, and as his girlfriend, I can fire anyone I want." The boss had always treated me well, so I wasn't about to just walk away. I took a seat on the couch. "You should probably check with him first." Bianca rolled her eyes. "Who do you think you are to tell me that?" She called the boss directly. His voice on the line sounded tired. "What's going on?" Bianca, who had been shouting at me moments before, immediately changed her tone. "Baby, I miss you." The boss sighed. "Just tell me quickly, I need to rest." Bianca shot me a triumphant glance. "There's a salesman here who doesn't follow the rules. He's always late. I want to fire him." "Do whatever you want," replied the boss. "I need to rest," and hung up. Bianca looked at me smugly. "Did you hear that? I can fire anyone I please. Now get out." As soon as I left the office, I felt a wave of anger and disbelief. The door slammed shut behind me with a noise that echoed down the silent hallway. Everyone's eyes were on me. My coworkers, who knew my worth to the company, all looked away, pretending to be busy. Nobody wanted to get involved now that the boss was away and the new queen was ready to start cutting heads. I took a deep breath and headed for my desk. My belongings were still there, untouched, but they no longer felt like mine. I grabbed my coffee mug, now cold, and took a sip as my thoughts raced. I needed a plan. Bianca believed she'd already won, that she could get rid of me as if I were just another disposable salesman. Her biggest mistake was failing to understand who I was to this company. Not merely a salesperson, but the one who kept it alive when everyone else had given up hope. And now she thought she could throw me out just like that. I calmly picked up my backpack, ignoring the whispers around me, and left without looking back. But once in the parking lot, I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel for several minutes, my heart pounding, my mind churning. I started the engine and drove home, yet the feeling of injustice burned inside my chest. I had to do something. When I arrived, I tossed my backpack on the couch and grabbed my phone. I called some influential contacts I'd built over the years, business partners, loyal clients, people who trusted me more than the company itself. I spent the next few hours talking to them, hearing their support and listening to some interesting offers. If Bianca thought I was expendable, she'd soon realize how much she stood to lose without me. In the following days, I watched the company begin to crumble, little by little. Long-standing clients started rejecting deals, complaining about the new policies Bianca had imposed. Her arrogance quickly took its toll. I got messages from former co-workers describing tense meetings and failed targets. It was only the beginning. On the phone with leads, on planes to potential buyers, and in post-work dinners locking down the details of major contracts. The boss knew that my value couldn't be measured by a single check-in time. That's why, years before, he personally told me, "Come in whenever works for you. Just keep the numbers high." It was an unwritten agreement, but a powerful one. As the boss's business grew, so did my responsibilities. I began traveling to corporate headquarters in other cities, negotiating face-to-face with large-scale clients who were skeptical about dealing with a smaller firm. Time after time, I sealed the deal. When the boss realized how crucial my personal touch was, he practically gave me carte blanche to set my my own schedule. If I needed the entire morning to prepare for a big meeting, so be it. If I had to leave a few hours early to attend a trade show across the country, no questions asked. This system worked smoothly for years until Bianca entered the picture. I remember the first time she showed up unannounced to one of our office lunches. The boss introduced her as someone special, a phrase that made my co-workers exchange knowing glances. She wore designer heels that clicked against the tile with an air of self-importance, and she greeted most employees with a polite but distant nod. When she spoke, it was always about herself, her aspirations, her tastes, her opinion on everything under the sun. She didn't make an effort to learn about the company's culture or the staff's individual roles. At the time, I thought she was simply a self-centered person, but nothing more. Little did I know how her attitude would magnify once she got even a sliver of authority. Over the next few weeks, Bianca started showing up more often. She'd visit the boss's office, close the door, and spend hours chatting with him. ACB. Few times I caught a glimpse of them discussing spreadsheets or financial charts. My guess was that she was trying to learn how the business operated, but no one ever explained her official role because she didn't have one yet. We heard rumors that the boss wanted her to experience a trial run to see if she could help manage a department or two. In reality, all she did was roam the corridors, commenting on people's desks, telling them to tidy up or to look sharper for potential visitors. Morale began dipping even before the boss went on his trip. People felt like they were being watched by someone who had no true knowledge of the company but held sway over the boss's ear. I tried to stay out of it. My sales were going well, and I was still deeply involved with multiple major clients. I had deals on the horizon that could secure our quarterly revenue target. None of that stopped Bianca from taking mental notes on who arrived at 8, who left at 5, and who took how many breaks a day. When the boss announced he'd be traveling for an entire month to secure partnerships overseas, I wasn't particularly worried. Normally, in his absence, one of our veteran managers, someone who truly understood the business, would step up. But the boss made a startling announcement. He was leaving Bianca in charge to see how she does. That decision sent shockwaves through the office. We'd never had a non-employee suddenly elevated to that level of authority. I recall the hush that fell over the entire floor when he told us. Some people exchanged nervous glances. Others just stared blankly, not sure what to think. In the days leading up to the boss's departure, Bianca tried to appear confident, striding around in her usual manner. She'd read from a clipboard, ask random employees about their tasks, and then say something dismissive or condescending. Well, I suppose that's acceptable. Or, is that really the best you can do? She said things like that to people who had worked there for a decade, people who were masters of their craft. I didn't realize it yet, but she was practically itching for a confrontation with someone. And, as fate would have it, I was the perfect target once the boss stepped onto that plane. The day she finally confronted me was the day after the boss flew out. Her waiting for me at 10 a.m. was no coincidence. She had clearly spent the previous afternoon going through the official policies, searching for any violation that could be pinned on me. But it was more than a simple matter of policy. It was personal. I heard from one of the receptionists that Bianca had been openly questioning why a mere salesman was so well paid. That was her phrase, a mere salesman. She looked at my numbers on paper but had no clue about the actual relationships I'd built or the hours I'd poured in behind the scenes. The moment that folder flew at my face, I realized just how reckless she could be. She had no sense of boundary or respect. Then I received an unexpected call from the boss himself. He sounded exhausted, but this time there was genuine concern. "What on earth is happening in the company?" he asked. "What do you think?" I replied. "Bianca fired me without consulting you. I assumed you already knew." A tense silence followed before he sighed. "I didn't realize it was this serious. She told me you were breaking company rules." I let out a sarcastic laugh. Breaking rules? I was bringing in 80% of the profits, and she fired me over a flexible schedule you yourself allowed. "So, how are things going over there?" He hesitated. "Not good. Clients are upset, and Bianca isn't handling it well." I felt a small triumph, but held back. "Well, that's no longer my problem, is it?" He took a deep breath. "We need to talk." We agreed to meet the next day. I knew exactly what I wanted. The boss needed me back, and this time I would have the upper hand. When we met, he looked more worn down than ever. "I made a mistake," he admitted straight away. "I gave Bianca too much authority, thinking she could handle it, but she obviously can't. I need you to return." I folded my arms, staring at him. "Return after what happened? After that public humiliation?" "I don't think so." He ran a hand over his face, frustrated. "I understand, but let me fix this. What do you want?" That was the question I'd been waiting for. I grinned. "I want control. A signed contract guaranteeing my autonomy. In my work with no interference. A clause ensuring I can't be fired without your direct approval. And of course a substantial raise." He looked surprised, but he knew he had no choice. Fine, I'll arrange it, but I need you as soon as possible. Bianca's messing everything up. I felt a wave of satisfaction, but kept my composure. I'll come back when the contract is signed and I have the guarantees I asked for. Until then, good luck with your girlfriend. I left the meeting with an indescribable feeling of triumph. Turning the situation around was glorious. In the end, Bianca was just a temporary obstacle. As soon as I had the signed contract, I returned to the company in a stronger position than ever. When I walked in the door, Bianca looked at me in disbelief. But this time, I was the one who smiled with an air of superiority. Surprised? I asked as I brushed past her to my office, treating her like little more than a minor nuisance. She tried to argue with the boss, but it was too late. Not long after, I learned she had quit, claiming she wasn't appreciated. I knew the truth. She just couldn't handle the reality that she was never right for the position. With Bianca gone, things returned to normal. Clients came back, sales rose, and my standing in the company was stronger than ever. The boss, now more cautious, treated me with a new level of respect. I learned a valuable lesson. No matter how indispensable you might be, there will always be someone who wants to bring you down. The difference between those who survive and those who fail lies in how you respond and prove your worth time and time again. Bianca thought she could destroy me, but all she did was make me more determined, more astute, and better prepared for whatever challenge came next. A few months later, I heard Bianca tried to start her own business, hoping to lure our clients away. I smiled at the news, knowing she lacked the experience or vision to succeed. I watched from a distance as her new venture teetered under bad decisions and poor management. I didn't sit still. I used my contacts, influence, and expertise to strengthen our company, making it impossible for hers to gain traction. Every client she approached was reminded of her failures. Every potential investor was shown evidence of her incompetence. Eventually, Bianca declared bankruptcy. One day, I received a message from her full of rage and frustration. I read it with a smirk, but never replied. There was no need. She had dug her own grave. In the end, I realized the best kind of revenge is not about shouting it to the world. It's quietly watching as the person who wronged you self-destructs with their own bad choices. Yet to truly understand how this entire situation came to a head and why it caused such lasting shockwaves through the company, you need more context about the dynamics at play. Let me take you back to the months leading up to Bianca's takeover and show you the environment I was living in. I had always been a man of routine, waking up around 7:30 or 8 a.m., strolling into the office by 10, but staying later than anyone else, frequently working evenings to contact clients in different time zones. My success as a salesperson wasn't only about those morning hours. It was about the time I invested where it mattered most. As the cut on my forehead stung and I saw the triumphant glint in her eyes, my emotions ran wild. Anger, disbelief, even a twinge of betrayal at the boss for letting someone like her reign unchecked. Still, I tried to handle it calmly, reminding her that she should consult him. Yet all it took was a single phone call for her to confirm she had free reign. That's when I knew I had to play a longer game. Storming out of there or causing a scene wouldn't help. This was about leveraging my reputation, my contacts, and my track record to show just how catastrophic it could be to lose me. The day I left my office, took my backpack, and walked down the hall. I remember glancing over at the Employee of the Month wall. My photo had been on that wall multiple times, 8 in total. For a second, I wondered if they'd take my photo. Down out of spite, but I decided it didn't matter. Let them. My real achievements weren't displayed in a frame, but in the financial statements and the client rosters I'd secured over the years. By the time I got home, I had already started planning. I made calls to longtime clients who had become more like personal friends, explaining in broad strokes what had happened. I didn't bash the company outright, but I told them I'd no longer be their direct point of contact. Many of them were stunned. Some even said, "If you go, we go." As much as it was tempting to say, "Let's do it," I advised them to hold off on any drastic actions. The truth was, I needed to see how far Bianca's influence would reach and how quickly everything might unravel. Those few days before the boss finally called me felt like an eternity. I got updates from employees who were my allies, describing how Bianca had instituted a militaristic approach, weekly timesheet inspections, strict break logs, dress code warnings, and mandatory 8 a.m. meetings that dragged on for 2 hours. Productivity nosedived. People were stuck in the office listening to Bianca's condescending lectures when they could have been out making deals or innovating new products. Tension was at an all-time high. Then the real trouble started. Clients boss, balking at sudden changes or at rude treatment from staff who were merely echoing Bianca's new tone. When the boss finally called, the relief in his voice was overshadowed by how frantic he sounded. He was in a different time zone, exhausted from consecutive meetings, and likely at his wits' end. I could almost picture him running a hand through his hair, scanning urgent emails about lost deals or angry clients, and wondering how on earth things had collapsed so fast in just a week or two. His question, "What on earth is happening?" revealed that Bianca had never truly explained what she was doing. She must have framed my departure as a corrective measure, telling him, "He's disregarding rules," or "He's out of control." Hearing his worried tone gave me the upper hand for the first time since this fiasco started. I wanted to scream, "You never should have trusted her," but I held back. Instead, I gave him the facts. When we arranged our meeting, I was fairly certain he was ready to beg me to return, and he was. The lines on his face seemed deeper than usual, as if he hadn't slept well in days. He admitted without flinching that he'd made a serious error in giving her so much power. Seeing him humble himself was a big change from the confident leader I once knew, but part of me still felt the sting of being let go so unceremoniously. That's why I made my demands crystal clear. I wanted absolute protection from another rogue manager's whims, more autonomy, and a pay raise that reflected my impact on the bottom line. The boss actually sighed with relief when I spelled out my terms. It was clear he would do anything at that point to restore balance, so I made him promise that I'd only come back once every detail was in writing. I needed that safety net. I wasn't going to put myself in a position where another Bianca could walk in, wave a folder at me, and send me packing. Once he agreed, I stepped out with a sense of victory that felt almost surreal. Signing that contract was one of the most satisfying moments of my career. I remember the crispness of the paper, the seriousness in the boss's eyes as he handed me a pen. With each signature, I felt a sense of justice being served, not just for me, but for every employee who'd been quietly bullied under Bianca's short reign. Of course, part of me also reveled in the fact that Bianca would be helpless to do anything about it. Her authority had evaporated the moment the boss saw how disastrous her leadership had been. Walking back into the office with the contract in place, I felt the atmosphere shift. People watched me, some in awe, some still fearful, but mostly relieved that someone who understood the real workings of the company was returning. Bianca's fury was palpable. Her eyes bored into me, but she knew there was nothing she could say. I gave her a polite nod as I breezed past, the same way one might greet a stranger you no longer find relevant. That subtle arrogance was intentional. I wanted her to taste defeat in the most civilized way possible. No shouting, no drama, just a silent statement of, "You can't touch me anymore." Her resignation a short time later didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was how quickly the company's performance rebounded. Clients who had been on the fence about renewing contracts suddenly felt reassured. Some who had threatened to leave came back, apologizing for the confusion. I found myself working overtime again, but this time it was to repair the damage Bianca had inflicted rather than to push new sales. And ironically, once we stabilized, I soared to new heights, winning even bigger deals because clients appreciated the fact that I was back on board. It wasn't long after that I heard through the grapevine that Bianca was trying to start her own enterprise. The details were murky. Some said it was a marketing firm, others said it was an e-commerce venture. Either way, I knew she lacked the deep professional network needed to thrive. More importantly, she lacked the humility to learn from her mistakes. She kept the same domineering attitude, which scared off potential partners and funders. When I got wind that she was attempting to poach a few of our clients, I responded strategically, reaching out to those clients to assure them of our ongoing improvements and new services. My confidence and track record spoke louder than her empty promises. Her business floundered. People told me horror stories. Interns quitting on the spot, investors backing out after a single conversation, critical deadlines missed because she couldn't manage projects effectively. I watched it all unfold from a distance, never interfering directly but always ready to protect my company's interests. Whenever an old contact mentioned Bianca's pitch to them, I'd calmly point out her history, how she disrupted a functioning system, undermined morale, and drove away major deals in just a few weeks of mismanagement. That alone was usually enough to make them back away from any arrangement with her. Ultimately, the announcement of her bankruptcy came as no shock. I heard it from one of the local business journals that reported on small startups failing. She sent me a furious text message full of accusations, but I simply let it sit there, unread for hours, then read it and never replied. There was no reason to. She had orchestrated her own downfall. downfall. No help from me was needed. By that point, the lesson was crystal clear to anyone who observed the situation. Arrogance can be lethal in business, especially when you target the wrong person. In reflecting on the entire ordeal, I sometimes wonder how things would have turned out if the boss had recognized her behavior sooner. Perhaps I'd never have been fired in the first place, and she'd have been relegated to some side project. But then again, life has a funny way of showing you who you can trust and what your true worth is. The fiasco only solidified my position, not just in the company, but in the industry at large. I emerged not just as the top salesperson, but as a figure that colleagues respected and some even feared, knowing that crossing me might backfire spectacularly. The moral of this story, for me, is about the silent power of consistency and relationships. My success wasn't built by boasting or crushing others. It was built by delivering results year after year and forging bonds of trust. That intangible currency is what ultimately saved me and the firm from Bianca's short-lived tyranny. Employees who disliked me personally still recognized my impact on their job security, and clients who could easily switch to a larger competitor chose to stay because of the respect I'd earned over time. Now, whenever I arrive at the office, still around 10 a.m., mind you, I pause sometimes to appreciate how the atmosphere has become calm and positive again. The boss, more appreciative than before, occasionally laughs about his terrible mistake, though I can tell the memory still embarrasses him. My fellow employees greet me warmly, and we share stories from the trenches of sales, marketing, or development. And every so often, a new hire will ask, "What really happened with that Bianca woman?" Which leads to hushed retellings of the infamous fiasco. Ultimately, though, I don't need to dwell on it. I hold a better contract than ever, and the company is thriving with solid leadership. Lessons learned from that fiasco. If there's one takeaway for anyone reading or listening to this story, it's that you should never underestimate the power of steady work, genuine relationships, and quiet resolve. People like Bianca come and go, leaving destruction in their wake. But if you've built a fortress of reliability, skill, and trust, you'll prevail. And in the end, you can watch silently as the arrogant fall on their own swords, undone by their refusal to respect the very people who keep a business alive. Because, as I said before, the best kind of revenge isn't loud. It isn't about grandiose public takedowns. It's about standing firm in your worth, stepping aside when someone insists on walking into their own doom, and letting the consequences catch up to them. By the time they realize how badly they've miscalculated, you'll be too busy thriving to pay them any further attention. That's exactly what happened with Bianca. She thought she was unstoppable, but she'd never done the hard work, never earned the loyalty of the people who mattered. In business and in life, that's a sure path to self-destruction. And as for me, I'm still here, quietly sipping my coffee at 10 in the morning, closing deals by 5 in the afternoon, and enjoying every moment of a career I fought for, one well-earned success at a time. That's how you survive a Bianca. That's how you turn a crisis into an opportunity for greater security and respect. And that's how you make sure that, in the long run, your value speaks louder than any boss's girlfriend or anyone else who dares to undermine your accomplishments.